Okay, so, we hear a lot about this whole idea of like real world assets, right? Like, what does that even mean? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's like, it's not just about Bitcoin or stablecoins anymore, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about taking things from the real world, like actual stuff like real estate.
Right, like houses and
Yeah. Houses, buildings, commodities,
like
even
gold and oil and stuff.
exactly, even like, pieces of companies like stocks, bonds, all that, turning it all into tokens you can trade on a blockchain.
So it's like taking something that's like physical or like exists in the real world and making it digital.
Kind of, but it's more than just making it digital. It's like, think about it. What if you could invest in a fraction of a skyscraper in New York City?
Oh, wow. Or
Or like a global supply chain of coffee beans, but you could trade it as easily as, I don't know, buying a song on iTunes or something.
whoa, so instead of buying like a whole building, you could buy a little piece of it.
Exactly. It's about unlocking the potential of these assets in a way that's never been possible before.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about some small niche market here, right?
Oh, no, 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 not at all. Some estimates put the potential value of this whole tokenized real-world asset thing in the hundreds of trillions of dollars.
Trillions, like with a T.
With a T, way bigger than the entire crypto market right now.
Wow. Okay, so this is huge. But like, how does it all work? What's the technology that makes this even possible?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and that's what we're going to be digging into today. We're talking about Chainlink.
Okay, Chainlink. A lot of our listeners have probably heard of them, right? They're big in the DeFi space.
Yeah, a lot of people know them for providing those reliable price feeds to DeFi applications, making sure the data is accurate.
Right, right. Super important for DeFi. But it sounds like Chainlink is doing a lot more than just that now, right?
Oh, yeah, way more. Think of it this way. If DeFi was like their garage band phase, they're building out a whole stadium rock concert setup now.
Okay, I like that analogy. So explain the upgrade. What are they adding to their repertoire?
They're becoming this like one-stop shop for all these crucial connections that these really complex smart contracts need. Like secure data feeds are just the start. They're tackling things like, what's it called? Oh, off-chain computation.
Off-chain computation.
Ooh.
Sounds complicated.
It kind of is, but basically it's like giving these smart contracts access to way more information and processing power.
So instead of just telling a smart contract to price of gold, you could give it like all this extra information about the gold itself.
Yeah, like where it came from, how pure it is, its entire history.
Wow, that's wild.
And get this, the really exciting part is they're pushing into this whole cross-chain interoperability thing with something called CCIP.
CCAP.
Catchy. Cross-chain interoperability protocol, I think.
Okay, that's a mouthful, but it sounds like a big deal.
Oh, it is. Right now, most blockchains are like these isolated islands. They don't talk to each other very well. CCIP is like building bridges between them.
So instead of having all these separate blockchains that can't really interact, you could have this like interconnected network.
Exactly. Like imagine if you could send like a tokenized asset, like a piece of that skyscraper we were talking about, from one blockchain to another.
Without it getting like lost in the mail.
Exactly. CCIP is like building the TCP/IP of the blockchain world, like the foundation of the internet.
Okay, that's a big claim. But I get it. It's about connecting everything, making it all work together seamlessly.
Exactly. It could be huge for this whole tokenized asset space.
This all sounds incredibly promising, but what makes Chainlink's approach, stand out? We've seen other projects attempt to bridge blockchains, but security has always been a major concern, right?
Yeah, and rightfully so. Chainlink's doing things differently. They're all about decentralization, which is huge for security.
So no single point of failure. Like if one part of the system goes down, the whole thing doesn't collapse.
Exactly. Think of it like instead of having one lock on your front door, you have a whole security system. Motion sensors, cameras, the works.
Makes sense. So more resilient, more trustworthy.
And the best part is institutions are starting to take notice. I mean, Sergey Nazarov, he's like the mastermind behind Chainlink.
Right, their co-founder.
Yeah, so he mentioned that Fidelity, the big investment firm.
Yeah, I know Fidelity.
They're putting their net asset value data on chain.
Really? On a public blockchain? That's a pretty big deal, right?
Huge. If Fidelity's willing to trust blockchain technology with that kind of information, it means they see real value in it, right?
Absolutely. So we're not just talking about, like, theory anymore.
Yeah.
This is actually happening.
It's becoming very real very fast. Imagine a world where all those complex financial documents like,
Fund prospectuses,
Yeah.
the things nobody ever reads because they're so long and confusing.
Exactly. What if those were all standardized and easily accessible on-chain? It could make investing way more transparent, more efficient.
That's a really interesting thought. So we're talking about potentially revolutionizing not just how we invest, but how the entire financial system works.
Potentially, yes.
Hmm.
But we got to be realistic here. Real-world assets, they're messy.
In what way?
They're tied to all these regulations, legal frameworks that are different everywhere you go. Some even require, like, physical inspections.
Oh, right. Like, you can't just tokenize a house without making sure the house actually exists.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
how do you prove that on a blockchain? That's one of the big challenges.
It's like bridging the gap between the digital world and the real world, making sure they match up.
And that's not always easy, but that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
Exactly. And Chainlink, they're not just building the tech, they're also tackling these real-world challenges head-on.
Like how? Give me an example.
Okay, so take proof of reserves, for example. This is something they're already doing, especially with stablecoins.
Proof of reserves, like proving that the digital dollars are actually backed by real dollars.
Exactly. They're using their decentralized network to make sure that the information on the blockchain matches what's happening in the real world.
So it's about building trust and transparency, basically.
Exactly. And this same approach, it can be applied to all sorts of real-world assets.
So you could have proof of reserves for, like, a tokenized real estate portfolio
Yeah.
or a gold-backed stablecoin.
Exactly. Or even a whole supply chain financing platform. The possibilities are, like, endless.
This is blowing my mind a little bit.
Mine too, and we're just getting started.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential, the tech, the challenges, but what about the elephant in the room? The big old traditional financial system.
TradFi, right?
TradFi, yeah, those guys.
Yeah.
They're not just going to roll over and let this new system take over, are they?
Probably not overnight. Sergey Nazarov, he had this great analogy. He called traditional finance an onion, layers upon layers of legacy systems and regulations.
An onion. Okay, I kind of see where he's going with this.
It's not something you can just peel away all at once. It's too risky, too interconnected.
So how do you even begin to integrate something as radical as blockchain technology into that kind of system?
Carefully. That's where Chainlink's approach is really smart. They're not trying to destroy the onion. They're finding ways to work with it.
Building bridges, not walls.
Exactly. They're working with big players like Swift, DTCC. These are like the giants of the financial world.
Wow, so they're not shying away from the establishment. They're going right to the heart of it.
And that's what's so brilliant about their strategy. They're meeting these institutions where they are, showing them how blockchain can actually improve their existing processes.
It's like a more collaborative, less disruptive approach.
Exactly. And in the long run, I think that's going to be way more effective.
Fascinating. We've covered so much ground already, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, we are just getting started. We haven't even touched on artificial intelligence yet.
AI. Okay, you're really going to blow my mind now.
Just wait till you hear how AI and blockchain are converging. It's going to change everything.
Okay, now you've got my attention. Let's take a quick break and then we'll dive into this whole AI thing. This is about to get really interesting. Okay, so AI and blockchain, two of the biggest buzzwords of like the century coming together. I'm ready. Hit me with it.
It's not just about buzz, though, right? It's about how these technologies could actually like reshape the world as we know it.
Okay, I'm all ears. Paint me a picture. What does this future look like?
All right, so remember we were talking about TradFi earlier with that whole onion analogy?
Yeah, layers upon layers of complexity.
Right, so think about it. Instead of having one giant AI calling all the shots in finance.
Which, let's be honest, would be kind of terrifying.
Totally. We could have a network of AIs all working together but independently.
Okay, so kind of like a checks and balances system, but with like super intelligent machines.
Exactly. No one AI would have too much power. They'd be constantly checking each other's work.
And how does blockchain fit into all of this?
That's the key. The blockchain provides that secure, transparent foundation for these AIs to communicate. No manipulation, no secrecy.
So it's like even if one AI goes rogue, the others would flag it immediately.
Exactly. It's about building the system where trust is baked in from the ground up.
This all sounds incredible, but are we getting a little ahead of ourselves here? I mean, this all seems very theoretical.
It's a fair point. We are talking about cutting edge stuff here. But remember when the internet was just like a bunch of static websites?
Yeah, I vaguely remember those dark ages.
My point is, technology moves fast. What seems impossible today could be like totally normal in a few years.
So you're saying we just need to, like, wait for the tech to catch up to our imaginations?
Patience is part of it, but it's more than that. It's about actively engaging with these ideas, shaping the future.
Okay, so what can our listeners, regular people, not tech geniuses,
Mhm.
do to get involved in this?
Honestly, just start learning. The more people understand this stuff, the better.
I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this show, right? To break down these complex ideas.
Exactly. But don't stop there. Dig into the details, experiment a little. There are even ways to try out crypto without risking a ton of money.
It's like dipping your toes in the water before you jump in the deep end.
Exactly. You might be surprised at how quickly you pick it up. And who knows, you might even find your next big passion project.
That's a great point. Learning new things is always a good thing. Okay, so we've talked about the exciting potential of AI and blockchain, but what about the, let's say, less glamorous side of things, like regulation? Governments aren't exactly known for being, quick and adaptable, especially when it comes to new technology.
True, regulation usually lags behind innovation, which can be frustrating, but it's not always a bad thing.
Okay, how so?
Well, think about it. Clear regulations can actually be really helpful for new industries.
You mean like to provide some stability, some guardrails?
Exactly. When people feel like there's some level of oversight, they're more likely to trust the system, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about stifling innovation, it's about making sure it happens responsibly.
Exactly. And the good news is we are starting to see some progress on that front. Some governments are actually creating frameworks for this stuff.
That's encouraging. It sounds like things are moving in the right direction, even if it's slow.
Slowly but surely. And don't underestimate the power of the industry itself to self-regulate.
Right, like with those organizations that set standards and best practices.
Exactly. They play a huge role in building trust and making sure this technology is used for good.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in this kind of messy middle ground right now. Like the technology is rapidly evolving, regulations catching up, and nobody really knows exactly what's going to happen.
It's a fascinating time to be alive, that's for sure. Uncertainty can be a little scary, but it also creates a ton of opportunity.
It's like we're all standing on the edge of something brand new, and it's up to us to figure out what it's going to become.
Exactly. And the more people who are engaged, the more diverse perspectives we have, the better that future will be.
Well said. Let's take a quick pause to gather our thoughts, and then I'm really curious to hear your final thoughts on all of this. So we've talked about a lot of really complex, really big picture stuff today, and I gotta say, it's a lot to process.
It really is. And one of the things that strikes me is even with all this amazing technology and these grand visions for the future, we're still just scratching the surface.
Yeah, it's like we can kind of see the outlines of this new world taking shape, but the details are still fuzzy.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this whole space so fascinating.
Totally, because it's not just about, like, passively observing these changes, it's about actively shaping them.
Right. Absolutely. And that's something that Sergey Nazarov really emphasized, this idea of a real world impact.
Yeah, he kept bringing it back to that, didn't he? Like, how does all this tech actually improve people's lives?
Exactly. And one of the examples he used that really stuck with me was supply chains.
Oh, yeah, he talked about how much more efficient and transparent they could be with blockchain.
Exactly. Like imagine a world where you could track your coffee from the farm where it was grown all the way to your cup every step of the way.
And not just track it, but like verify that it's ethically sourced, that the farmers got paid fairly, all of that.
Exactly. And because it's all on the blockchain, it's tamper-proof, auditable, transparent.
And that kind of transparency, that level of trust, that could revolutionize so many industries, not just coffee.
Absolutely. Think about real estate or voting or even something as basic as like proving your identity.
So many possibilities. It's almost overwhelming.
It is, but in a good way, Like it feels like we're on the cusp of something truly transformative.
I agree, but I'm sure some of our listeners are probably thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but what about the downsides? Is this stuff really scalable? Is it secure? Is it even practical?
And those are all valid questions, but I think it's important to remember that we're still in the early stages here.
Right, like it's still early days for this technology.
Exactly. And if we look back at the history of like the internet, for example, it started out pretty clunky and niche too.
That's true. I mean, I remember when having a website was a big deal.
Exactly. And now look at it, it's completely ubiquitous. It's transformed every aspect of our lives.
Okay, so you're saying we need to be patient, give it time for the tech to mature.
Patience is definitely key, but it's more than that. It's about being actively involved in shaping this technology, not just waiting for it to happen to us.
So what can our listeners do? How can they be a part of this, even if they're not like programmers or venture capitalists?
Honestly, just stay curious, keep learning.
Easier said than done, right? There's so much information out there, it can be hard to know where to start.
True, but that's kind of the beauty of it. There's a low barrier to entry. Anyone can learn this stuff.
So, like, what would you recommend? Where should people go to learn more about blockchain, about Chainlink, about all of this?
Well, podcasts like this are a great starting point, of course, but don't stop there.
Yeah, we've only got so much time in an episode, as much as I'd love to talk about this stuff all day.
I hear you, but there are tons of resources available online. Chainlink has some great documentation. There are online courses, communities. Even just following some of the thought leaders in this space on social media can be really eye-opening.
Great advice. And I think the key takeaway here is don't be afraid to dive in, to get your hands dirty, experiment a little.
Exactly. Because the future of finance, it's not being decided by some small group of experts in a closed-door meeting. It's being built out in the open by all of us.
And that's what makes this such an exciting time to be a part of this space.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today.
Time flies when you're having fun and learning about the future of finance.
That's for sure. To our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Keep those brains engaged, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.